Learn how you measure up to these top 10 vitality markers by doing this self-assessment right along with me. The first assessment is posture. And posture is a very important thing to be looking at because if you're living with pain, it might be coming from poor posture. If you are taking shallow breaths, this could be due to poor posture. And if you're just prone to falls, this might be due to poor posture. So it's definitely something to pay attention to. And the thing that I'm looking for is what's called the plumb line. And that is where our ear is in line with our shoulder, shoulder in line with the middle of the hip, and the middle of the hip in line with the center of the ankle. So if you are sideways, you're trying to line everything up. And so this is not necessarily finding military posture. This is actually something that can cause a lot of issues in the neck and shoulders. And it's also quite straining to try to maintain. So I love using the cue of lifting up through the top of your head, just slightly tucking your chin in, and everything just falls open very beautifully. And you might even notice, hey, your back is not getting pinched on. You're able to take a nice deep breath. And this does actually center your body. So you have a very clear center of gravity here without being forward. These are the things that I see most often. The head is forward. So common. And so when we have a forward head posture, our head actually weighs more. This is putting pressure on our neck and our shoulders. It's putting pressure into the back. And we're already on our way down. So if we were to trip, it's that much easier for us to be taken down. So when we can align, we're safer. And again, we just have a lot less pain in our body because of this alignment that just feels so good, so natural. So what I watch for, I actually do a posture assessment with a program that I have. But just looking at yourself, just notice, is your head coming forward? And you'll know it's because when you go to lengthen up through the top of your head, you'll notice how much you actually had to move your head to do that. Another one is, where is the center of gravity in your feet? So if you bring awareness to that right now, are you mainly in your toes where you're kind of forward? Is a lot of your weight back in your heels? Are you already feeling some pressure in your low back? Because maybe you're standing like this, kind of like opened out in the front, large curve in the low back. Or are you a little bit rounded and tight in your upper back? So these are all things that just by looking and noticing, maybe you have to have someone else kind of look at your posture for you too, but noticing, well, how far is my head really from my plumb line? Do I already feel issues in my low back? Am I really far forward in my toes or in my heels? These are all small adjustments that make a big difference. So if anything, just practice that nice, tall, stacked posture. Head over shoulders, shoulders over hips, and hips over feet. Assessment number 2 is balance. For some, they really haven't thought much about how is my balance doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on one leg at a time, holding balance for 40 seconds each leg. Okay, do it with me. Side note, just in case, it's okay to stay close to a wall or a piece of furniture, just in case you need to hold on. Okay, so pick a leg, and we're just gonna go right into balance. Nothing fancy about this. This is just an assessment of how are we doing. So you might notice right away, oh, I do need to hold on. Okay, just note that. I don't want you to be jumping around or waving your arms all crazy. If that's the case, then you do need to hold on, even if it's just with a finger. We need to keep this safe while we're here. Now just notice what's going on with this leg. Are you feeling your footwork a lot? Maybe it's your ankle. Maybe you're feeling a lot of burning in like your calf or even like into your hip. So these are things to notice because they tend to be the weaker spots of that leg and therefore need strengthening to improve balance. Let's switch over now. Other leg. We're balancing again 40 seconds on this leg. We don't want to be jumping around. So if you need to hold on, that's okay. The interesting thing here is that you might find that you need to hold on more with one leg and then the other side was easier. So this is picking up on some imbalances in the body. It's extremely common to have a stronger leg and a weaker leg. And so once we can identify this, then we can focus on it and start to bring balance to the body. If we have a very dominant leg and a very weak leg, you're more prone to tripping. So this is something that we do want to be able to focus on. And that's 40 seconds on each leg. How'd you do? Assessment number 3. This is called the hip hinge. And first of all, the hip hinge is a very functional movement that we need to do every single day. So the most exaggerated hip hinge is when we go to pick up something heavy. We got to get those hips back and then make sure that we're picking up. So using those legs. But most often, we're also using that hip hinge when we're doing any sort of forward movement. So this might be to move something closer to you, or you're doing the dishes, or you're mopping. And so this hip hinge is actually an exercise called the deadlift. But it can be done incorrectly, and it also really shines a light on incorrect posture deviations, movement patterns that can cause a lot of back issues. So let's go over what it looks like to do it right, and then how to troubleshoot if you're having a hard time getting into that proper hip position. So a proper hip position is, imagine that you're kind of just going to get cut from the creases of your hip and up. So creases of the hip, we're going to fold and we're reaching our tailbone back. Now do notice that my back stays neutral. So I'm not rounded, and I'm definitely not arching up either, because that's going to really pinch on that back. We just want some length here, glutes lengthening back, and then we can stand up and just find that nice tall posture. So one more time, we lengthen back, hinging from the hips, and come up. Now what I normally see kind of go wrong, the glutes will kind of tuck under, and then we're trying to just lower down, almost like we're just trying to bring our chest closer to the floor. And so often we actually perform daily activities like this. So we want to protect our back with the hip hinge. Lengthen back, not tuck under, and round down. So a few of the things that I kind of give clients to see if, what's going on here. Is it a lack of core strength? Is it tight hamstrings? Is it that your back is already kind of stuck and rounded, so it's a process to kind of start to correct the posture before we can really go into that natural hinge? And so something that I like to just take clients over to is just bump into the wall and rest there. And so you're just kind of lengthening your cheeks back, they're in contact with the ball, and then I just want you to be able to hang out here. And so you're lifting the chest just a little bit. Again, nice long back. You're lengthening up to the top of your head. You're not looking up. And this is actually how we want our body to be when we're in the hip hinge. So it's just getting your body into that position. If you have tight hamstrings, you'll need to bend your knees more to lengthen your back. If you have a little bit of a rounded back, you're really stiff in your upper back, it's going to be really important that we really try to open you up here. And that kind of is just, open chest, think long. And this is how we start to kind of troubleshoot and really just identify what it could feel like. And then once we do that more often of what it could feel like, the body starts to learn how to incorporate it in everyday life. And that's when we start to really make a difference in our back health. Assessment number 4 is the squat. This might be very familiar to you, and it's one of the most functional exercises that we do because every time we sit down, we are performing a squat. Unfortunately, squats can actually really irritate the knees. And so I want to be able to go over when we know that we can squat and just make sure we have really good form when we do it, and when we really should be avoiding it because it's not really helping the knees. So when we go into a squat, we really want to line everything up. So we've just done the hip hinge. The hip hinge will play a part in this squat, but then we also bend from the knee. So number one thing is start to push those hips back. Remember, we're not going to round the cheeks under. Push the hips back, and then we want to try to start to get low. So those knees will start to bend. And then you stand up. Hips back, then knees bend, and we stand up. So a couple of things that I watch here is making sure that your feet are planted down to the floor. And the most common thing I see is people tipping into their toes. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So they're on the toes, heels are sometimes really off the ground, sometimes just barely touching. But what this is doing is it's putting a lot of pressure in these knees. So if we can rock back, get those heels on the ground, a little bit more weight in those heels is better. Then we've just activated everything back here and we've softened those knees. Okay, so keeping that weight through your whole foot, or maybe even a little bit more into your heels, is going to be the safer bet for your knees. Also, we don't want those knees to pass over your toes. So even if your heels are down, but you're kind of just bending just from these knees, your knees are going to pass over your toes, and that's, again, a lot of pressure on that knee area, that kneecap. So we want to keep those hips back and down and up. It doesn't have to be super low. It's okay. Now, what if you're having a really hard time keeping your heels down? You feel like you're going to fall backwards. Then I suggest that you get in front of a chair and you just practice sitting into that chair, standing up. Sit in that chair, stand it up, but make sure your heels stay down the whole time. And that tip should help you save those knees in squats. Assessment number 5 is an overhead press or an overhead motion. In exercise, you might typically have weights pressing up overhead. In yoga, you might do something like a downward dog, which although you're facing down to the floor, is still an overhead movement. And the reason it's so important to check on how you're aligning with your overhead movement is really to be able to prevent injuries in your shoulders. The shoulders are easily injured because they have such a big range of motion with little tiny rotator cuff muscles to try to hold those shoulders in place. And so a lot can go wrong if we're going into exercise without really the proper posture. So I'm going to show you what we're looking for here. In an overhead motion, we want to be able to get those arms to line up with our ears. So from a side view, it looks like this. When we are really stiff in our posture, especially the upper back, the shoulders will be a lot more stiff, meaning the arms might only be able to get to here. So if you could imagine you're trying to press 5 pounds in each hand and you're holding it over here rather than in line with the center of gravity, just like your head in a forward head posture where your head is literally heavier and the rest of your body has to work so much harder. Same is going on when you're trying to do overhead work with stiff and tight shoulders and upper back. And so in this assessment, it's really about being able to know how ready you are for overhead movement. If things are looking good, it's pain-free, you can pick up 5 pounds, press overhead, you know that your arm is close to your ear, then you're good. If you're noticing that you're here, and don't cheat, don't try to put your head between your arms, but if your arms are anywhere further forward than your ears, then you know that you're actually straining your shoulders and that there needs to be an additional flexibility regimen to help to lengthen that posture and get a healthy range of motion moving through your shoulders. Again, this is all to be able to prevent injury and not get injured once you're ready to exercise. Assessment number 6 is the hip hinge and bridge. So when we lay down on the back, we want to make sure that your feet stay on the ground. The number one thing I see is people tipping into those toes once again. So this is another one, just paying attention to what those feet are doing. And what we'll do here is we're going to start to bring these hips up in our bridge. We want to squeeze the cheeks at the top and come back down. And so what you might do is at least 10 to 20 of these. And what we want is feedback to what really starts to work while we're here. We don't necessarily want to tuck and roll up. What this is doing is it's helping our posture and our hip hinge that we've done already when we practice the hip hinge here, right? So we don't want to tuck under our glutes when we're walking around or hinging in everyday life. So we don't necessarily want to be doing that here either because it all connects. It's all training the body on how we want it to move in everyday life. So we're just going to be hinging You can squeeze at the top. So the bridge is glute work. So we're working these cheeks. And the number one thing that I see happen here is that people start to feel either quads or they get hamstring Charlie horses. And let me tell you what's going on there. If you're feeling quads, it's possible that you tipped into your toes, or your quad muscles are just so dominant that the backside of your body has turned off. Okay, that's a bigger problem. That's definitely not going to give support to your back. It's creating a lot of weaknesses and imbalances in your body. So if you've done 10 to 20 of these and all you're feeling is your quads burning, then we know that we do have an imbalance happening there. Second, what if you actually start to cramp into these hamstrings? Well, then we know that your glutes never turned on. And the glutes really are such powerful muscles for stabilizing the hips, giving support to your low back. When they turn off though, leaving these hamstrings to work all by themselves, again, we have an issue, an imbalance happening. So we definitely want to be able to tune in and learn to isolate into these really important cheek muscles, because it's giving so much support to the backside of your body. We don't always think about the backside of our body, but it needs that support, it needs that strength. And this is a great strength building exercise when it's done correctly. It's also one that will exacerbate issues if we don't take care of learning how to do it properly and learning proper muscle isolation. So if you're kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of feeling a little bit of my quads, a little bit of my hamstrings, a little bit of my glutes, I want to be able to advance this just a next level to give you even more feedback into what your body is doing. So we will move into a single leg bridge. We're going to be doing it on both sides. So I really want you now to place a hand into the cheek. We want to feel it flex when it's at the top or as we're getting to the top. So one leg is up, this leg is working. Remember, our heel stays down and you're going to bridge up. You should feel this muscle tightening at the top. If you're not, let's just hang out here for a second. If you're not feeling that this is your main muscle, this cheek working, then you might be feeling it in this hamstring. It may have cramped on you already. So again, that's that sign that hamstring is dominant, glute was not working, or you're feeling your low back, meaning we're needing to really strengthen that back side of your body. Low back should not be kicking on here. Okay, so let's check the other side. So that side might have felt great. Now let's check the other one. This is where we're checking for those imbalances. What side is stronger, which side is weaker? So hand on that cheek again, we'll bridge up, we're gonna hang out here, feel that muscle. When we touch the muscle, it actually tells our brain to turn on and connect to that muscle. So you're doing yourself a favor by holding on to that muscle, giving it that, okay, it's time to work cue. And we're checking to see, how's that hamstring? Is it taking over or is the glute still doing its job? 3, 2, 1, and rest down. Good. And I really hope that that was a very effective glute strengthening exercise for you. And again, not anything that was causing cramps or low back pain. Assessment number 7 is proper core contraction. And I really do love to teach this one because it's usually the number one assessment or skill that is misunderstood. So for example, in Pilates, we're taught to draw in our belly button towards the spine. And I really want you to actually forget that cue. Don't do it anymore, because what that can do is it can actually cut off your breathing system into your diaphragm. And so when we are doing our abdominal work or any other exercise for that matter, we need proper core support, core contraction. So we also need to not only have the strength, but be able to breathe while we're contracting. And this can be kind of a hard thing to first understand, but with practice, it really makes a big difference. So we're going to go over what you're looking for to ensure that you have proper core contraction and you're able to breathe. So laying down on your back. When we're here, we do want to find what's called a neutral spine. So that just might mean that we have a little bit of a gap between your low back. Nothing ginormous, should not be like 2 inches, but we're also not trying to smash our low back into the floor. But what we are going to do here is just place your hands on your tummy. It's going to give you excellent feedback as I give you some cues.
So if I were to tell you that you're going to get punched in the stomach, what would be your reaction? You should brace and tighten up. And when you brace the whole core, it's not just in the front here. It's also through that whole, it's like a corset all the way around. So into your sides should brace and firm up. Upper abs, middle abs, and lower abs should all firm up. Now, the question is, can we keep that while we go into other core exercises? So when we go into a crunch, for example, do we have the strong core? So again, this is not sucked in. This is not drawn in. It's strong. It's braced. It's everything is working together to stabilize your spine. Then if we went into a crunch, can we maintain it? So let's exhale. Crunch. Abs are on. Lengthen back down. Abs are on. Exhale up. Inhale down. So no matter what I'm doing, if I'm in a crunch or I've lowered my head, I can keep my abs on the whole time. I can even keep my abs on the whole time while I'm talking to you. And so this is what isolation is. This is what control is. And I'm still able to breathe. So I also want you to know how to brace the core in isolation and still be able to breathe. And what that means is we have to get your breathing system to work with you. So we're not up here breathing in our chest, shallow breathing. We're still getting down into the diaphragm. Core is strong. Also, when you go into core contraction, now that we've been trying to hold for a little while, is there something else in your body that's starting to ache? Like maybe your neck or your upper traps, or maybe your quads are gripping. Just give a little check. What else is turning on? So if we've got our abs on, we're anticipating a punch. Did your quads also flex and firm up? What about your glutes? What about your neck? So these should not be turning on when we go to turn on our abs. We don't turn those muscles on until we tell them to turn on. But if they're responding in a way that's trying to also turn on when we turn on our abs, now we have a body imbalance. And that is definitely something that you want to be able to work on separating. Control in your core, isolation. When you want it, quads don't turn on until you want them to. Okay, for example. So this is something to just try to keep practicing. Know how to brace through the entire core, know how to breathe, and know how to isolate. Then you have proper core contraction.
Assessment number 8 is the exercise called plank. I only give this exercise when I know that the client that I'm working with can actually find their core. So it may not be the most isolated core contraction, but they can turn it on, because remember, core contraction is giving spine stability. So if you're ready for this assessment, then we will go into plank. And there's 2 levels that we can go into. So the first level is being on the knees. And I typically will teach someone to go down to your elbows just so we don't have unnecessary pressure on the wrists. So coming down to your elbows, what we're going to go into here is a lift of the hips. And we just want to think of length. So I do actually want you to think of that nice tall posture again, where we're lengthening through the top of your head. And we're here. And while you're here, you should feel your abs. So let's rest for a moment. In that position, did you feel your abs turn on to keep you basically holding up against gravity? If you did not feel those abs kick on, but you felt your legs or your low back, then we really do need to strengthen that core. If everything felt fine, then you can go to level 2. So that's plank on your elbows and your toes. So here, starting on your knees, curling your toes under, and we lengthen. So this is where I see things go wrong. We either are sinking, really bad for your back, please don't do this, or your hips are way up here, abs are not working, but your arms are. Okay, so this is the number one thing that I see the body want to kind of go into, this like natural cheat, just because it's not strong enough yet. So it is okay to go to your knees and kind of build strength from there, but just remember what you're looking for is that it's a core exercise. If something else is turning on, especially the low back, that means that you need to increase the strength of your core. Assessment number 9 is the sit-up. And I have a memory of a client of mine going to go do a sit-up, and he was just absolutely stuck on the floor. Because it's one of those things that you don't think about. You know, we did them in high school, but then when have you really gotten down on the floor to go into a sit-up? So where is the strength? And I will warn you, if you have a bit of a tummy, this is going to restrict your range of motion. Also, it's important that we're able to breathe. So again, it all comes back to proper core contraction and proper breathing. So if we go into our sit-up, we're going to keep our knees bent. And when we come up into a sit-up, we don't want to just throw our body up, okay? It's all about muscle, being able to get your muscles to move your body, not momentum, because this is how we injure ourselves when we're trying to throw our body around. So what you'll do here is exhale, come up, and then we'll inhale at the top, exhale, come down. Inhale at the bottom. And you only need to do one. But again, if you're finding that it's difficult to do that, there's a couple of things that come up. Either a very, very stiff back, almost like you feel like you're in a teetering rather than being able to roll up. This will definitely reduce your range of motion, making it very hard to not only do a sit-up, but just be able to get into the core and do other exercises that are very functional and play out in daily life. Second, this is a very isolated exercise. So if your abs are not strong enough, you're going to find that you're really trying to throw yourself up, or you're maybe just doing a crunch, or your legs are lifting quite a bit. So there's just a lot of things that can kind of go very messy in this exercise, and you want to be able to move through this as slow as possible. When I give this exercise to clients, I actually tell them do as few as you can, and that is a real indicator of core strength. Assessment number 10 is getting up from the floor. And this is such a vitality indicator. And when we can get up and down from the floor, it shows that we're very functional, we're strong, and we have balance. When we start to have issues with getting up and down from the floor, these are very good signs for me to be able to pick up on okay, is it a balance thing? Is it leg strength? Are we not flexible enough? And so we're feeling restricted with our range of motion. So while we start here on the floor, you can get up and down from the floor a zillion different ways. I'm going to show you the most functional way because it's going to give you the most benefit, because we're actually implementing a lunge exercise into it and balance exercise. But if you have an injury or some sort of pain going on, I want you to really protect that and find a way for you to be able to move up and down from the floor as pain-free as possible. So that really can become the challenge sometimes, is just staying pain-free and getting up and down from the floor. But in an ideal world where we're getting up and down off the floor, no problems, what we would want to do is actually not need our hands. Because for functionality, if we're holding on to something, let's say, you're holding on to a kid and you need to get up from the floor, we would need to get our legs into the right position. So that would be rolling into both knees. Now we would set up in a lunge. So you've grounded this foot here, giving you a few pointers here. Ground that foot, take that back toe into a curl, and then we're up. And so that is the number one way that we want to be able to get up and down off the floor. It shows the most strength and mobility and control. Now again, that could look very different for you. It may not even happen on the very first try, but I do urge you to keep practicing this skill. I consider it to be a life-saving skill. And so something to just keep strengthening your body for the purpose of being able to do this very functional movement. So those are the 10 assessments to help you build awareness of how your body is doing. These are the 10 exercises that I take a new client through when I'm starting to build their programming. And these exercises are so telling in what's going on with your body and ultimately how it can improve and how it can function at its best. I know this was a lot of information. There might be a lot of questions or even some concerns that come up. So if you would like to reach out to me, I would love to get to know you, understand what some of these concerns are, and we can see if we can work together to bring you to your optimal health and optimal movement. You can go to my website, bodypotentialfitness.com, and schedule a complimentary consultation. Our session together is going to be a very personalized session where we're going through some very similar assessments of what we've just done, but this time I get to have my eyes on you and I get to really pick up the patterns that are happening in your body. We can really find out some great insights on how we can help you feel better, get you more energized, prevent pain, or even manage some pain that you might be living with. So this is a great time to be able to really accelerate any results that you're looking to get. I invite you to check me out on my website, and I hope to meet you soon. I hope you found this information helpful. I would love to hear from you. Please put any comments or questions below and subscribe to my channel.